The day their father was buried, the world went quiet for the two boys. No mother, no protection, only silence and hunger. But what they didn't know was this. They were not alone. Someone was watching. The man who shared their blood had already decided their fate. Not because they did anything wrong, but because they were alive. Because as long as these boys breathed, the inheritance would never be his. And in that moment, a wicked plan was born. Hunger does not knock. It enters quietly and stays. The house was no longer theirs. No food, no money, no protection. The boys learned quickly what grief does not teach: how to survive. For months after their father's death, Obinna and Chike lived like shadows. They thought the worst had already happened, that losing their father was the end of their suffering. But in Africa, danger does not always knock. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. The uncle arrived 3 days after the burial. No tears, no prayers, only questions. Where did your father keep the land papers? Who controls the house now? What will you children eat? He smiled when he asked, but his eyes never did. To the village he said he came to help. But at night, when the lanterns went out, the boys heard him whisper to their aunt, "If they disappear, everything becomes simple." The older brother understood something then. They were no longer orphans. They were targets. And from that night on, every meal tasted like a test. Every kindness felt borrowed, and sleep became a risk, because the uncle had made a decision. And once a wicked man decides, he does not stop halfway. At first, Namdi played the role. Food appeared. School resumed. Neighbors praised him. Then kindness began to expire. Meals shrank. School fees delayed. Shoes stopped being replaced. When the boys asked questions, Namdi smiled thinly. "Your father spoiled you." At night, the older boy, Obinna, listened. He heard land papers shuffle. He heard visitors whisper. He heard a sentence that changed everything. "If they don't survive, the land is clean." From that day, survival became a strategy. The boys slept lightly. They ate fast. They spoke little. Food spoiled unexpectedly. Doors locked at night. Strange objects appeared near their beds. The village saw nothing, because suffering that happened slowly looks normal. Night came quietly, too quietly. The compound was calm in the way danger often is, when it has already made up its mind. The two boys sat on the floor of the small kitchen hut, sharing a bowl of thin cassava porridge. It was all they had eaten that day. The fire crackled softly, throwing long shadows against the mud walls. Then footsteps. Measured, confident, familiar. Their uncle appeared at the doorway, holding a tray. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not the tight smile of impatience. Not the sharp look of annoyance. A real smile. And that was what scared them. "My sons," he said softly, his voice smooth like oil. "You have suffered enough?" The older boy stiffened. The younger one looked up, confused. Their uncle knelt and placed 2 cups on the floor, warm milk mixed with ground nuts. A luxury, something they had not tasted since their father died. "You need strength," the uncle continued. "Tomorrow I will take you to see someone about work." Hope, dangerous and bright, rose in the younger boy's eyes. The older brother felt something else. A warning. Their father had once said, "When someone who has never fed you suddenly remembers your hunger, ask why." The uncle pushed the cups closer. "Drink." The younger boy reached for his cup. The older brother's hand snapped out and stopped him. The uncle's smile flickered. "What is wrong?" he asked too quickly. The older boy looked at the drink. The smell was strange, too bitter beneath the sweetness. "We already ate," the boy lied. The uncle's eyes hardened. "You will drink," he said, no longer smiling. Silence pressed down on the room. The younger boy whispered, "Brother." The uncle picked up 1 cup himself. "You think I would poison my own blood?" He scoffed. He raised the cup to his lips. But he did not drink. Instead, he tilted it slightly, just enough for the firelight to catch something settling at the bottom. A fine, dark powder. The older boy's breath caught. The uncle saw it. In that instant, the mask fell completely. He slammed the cup to the ground. "So you are clever now?" he hissed. The younger boy began to cry. The uncle stood, towering over them, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can outlive me? You think the land your father left will ever be yours?" He grabbed the younger boy's arm. The older brother moved without thinking. He shoved the uncle hard. The cup shattered. The liquid spilled into the dirt. The uncle staggered back, stunned more by the defiance than the force. For a moment, no one moved. Then the uncle laughed. A cold, broken laugh. "You have chosen the hard way," he said. He turned and walked out into the night. The boys sat shaking on the floor, surrounded by broken pottery and spilled poison. That was the night they understood the truth. Their uncle did not just want them gone, he wanted them erased. And from that moment on, survival was no longer about endurance. It was about escape. As the fire burned low, the older brother whispered words that would change their fate forever. "We leave before dawn." And somewhere in the darkness, their uncle was already planning his next move. The house was asleep, but danger was wide awake. The lantern outside the compound flickered as the wind pushed against the walls. Inside the small room, Obinna lay still, counting his breaths. Beside him, little Cheek pretended to sleep, though his eyes had not closed for hours. They had learned this skill quickly, how to be silent when fear is loud. Earlier that evening, they heard their uncle arguing with a visitor. "By tomorrow, everything will be settled," the man had said. "Those boys are becoming a problem." No names were mentioned. None were needed. Obinna understood immediately. This was not another beating. Not another threat. This was an ending. He gently shook Cheek awake and placed a finger over his lips. No words, only eyes. Slowly, Obinna reached under the thin mattress and pulled out the small cloth bundle he had been preparing for weeks. 2 dry pieces of cassava, their father's old pocket knife, a torn photograph of their family. That was all they owned. The boys waited until the compound fell completely quiet. No footsteps, no voices, only the distant sound of crickets and a dog barking far away. Obinna pushed the door open inch by inch. It creaked. Both boys froze. Seconds passed. Nothing. They stepped into the night barefoot, the cold ground biting into their skin. They avoided the main path, crawling through the back where the cassava farm met the bush. Just as they reached the fence, a voice cut through the darkness. "Where do you think you're going?" Their uncle stood near the doorway, silhouetted by the lantern light. His shadow stretched across the yard like a trap. Cheeky began to tremble. Obinna stepped forward, his heart hammering. "We're going to fetch water," he said, forcing his voice steady. Their uncle stared at them for a long moment. Then he laughed. "At this hour?" He took a step toward them. And that was when Cheeky screamed. Not loud, but sharp enough. Instinct took over. Obinna grabbed his brother's hand and ran. They sprinted into the bush, thorns tearing at their legs, branches slashing their faces. Behind them, their uncle shouted, but the darkness swallowed his voice. The boys did not stop. They ran until their lungs burned, until the sounds of the village disappeared, until fear turned into pure motion. At the edge of the forest, they collapsed beside each other, gasping, shaking, alive. Obinna pulled Chike close and whispered the first prayer he had spoken in months. "Papa, if you can still see us, please don't let us die tonight." Above them, the moon slipped through the clouds. They had no home, no money, no plan, but they had escaped. And that night, under the open sky, 2 boys chose life. Even when the world had already decided they should disappear, dawn did not arrive gently. It came without apology. A thin gray light crept over the forest, revealing what the night had hidden. Scratched legs, torn skin, and 2 boys who were far too young to be alone in the world. Obinna woke first. His body screamed in protest as he sat up. Every muscle ached. His feet were swollen and bleeding. Beside him, Cheek slept curled into a tight ball, his small chest rising and falling too fast, like he was still running in his dreams. For a moment, Obinna allowed himself to believe they were safe. Then he remembered. The lantern, the voice, the laughter. Fear returned like a second heartbeat. They could not stay. The forest that had protected them at night now felt dangerous in daylight. Obinna shook Cheeky gently. "We have to move," he whispered. Cheeky opened his eyes and immediately sat up, scanning the trees in panic. When he realized they were alone, he nodded without speaking. Childhood had left them quickly. They walked for hours. No road at first, just bush, dry leaves, and pain. The sun climbed higher, turning the air thick and unforgiving. Cheeky stumbled often. Each time, Obinna pulled him back up. "I'm tired," Cheek finally said, his voice breaking. Obinna looked at his brother's cracked lips, his dusty face, his shaking legs. "So am I," he replied. "But we can't stop." By midday, they reached a road. Not a welcoming one. A long stretch of cracked asphalt cutting through emptiness. No houses, no shade. Just heat and silence. Vehicles passed occasionally. None stopped. Some drivers slowed to stare. Some laughed. One man rolled down his window and shouted, "Where are your parents?" Obinna said nothing. The man drove off. Hunger arrived quietly, then violently. Their cassava was gone before the sun reached its highest point. Thirst followed. Cheeky's steps became slower. His hand loosened in Obinna's grip. Then Cheeky collapsed, right there on the road. Obinna dropped beside him, shaking him desperately. "Cheek! Cheek! Wake up!" Cheek's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "I'm cold," he whispered. In the middle of a burning day, Obinna felt panic claw up his throat. He looked around wildly. No houses, no trees, no help. He dragged Cheek to the roadside, using his own body to shield him from the sun. For the first time since they ran, Obinna cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears dropping onto the dust. He pressed his forehead to his brother's and whispered, "Please, just stay." Minutes passed. Then, a sound. An engine slowing. Obinna looked up. A battered pickup truck had stopped a short distance away. A woman stepped out. She was older, strong-looking, her wrapper dusty, her face lined by years of work and worry. She studied the boys carefully, not with pity, but with recognition. "Where are you coming from?" she asked. Obinna hesitated. Every warning his father had ever given him screamed inside his head. But Chaki stirred weakly. "We don't have a home," Obinna said finally. The woman looked at Cheek, then at Obinna's bleeding feet, then back at the empty road. She sighed. "Get in," she said. "Before this road finishes you." Obinna did not move. The woman met his eyes. "Sometimes," she added quietly, "help looks like a stranger." After a long second, Obinna lifted Cheek into his arms and walked toward the truck. As the door closed behind them and the engine started, Obinna did not feel relief, only uncertainty, because escape was only the beginning. Ahead of them was a world that did not know their names, did not care about their pain, and owed them nothing. And somewhere behind them, a man who would eventually realize the boys had not died. They had disappeared. And that made them dangerous. The pickup truck rattled forward, coughing dust into the evening air. Obinna sat on the metal floor at the back, Chike's head resting on his lap. With every bump, Chike winced but did not wake. His skin burned, then chilled again. Obinna wrapped his thin shirt tighter around him, as if cloth could replace safety. The woman drove without speaking, not because she was cruel, but because she had learned that the road did not like explanations. After a long while, she spoke without turning her head. "My name is Mama Ifunanya." Obinna nodded, unsure if he was expected to answer. "I sell Gary in the next town," she continued. "That road you were on, it doesn't forgive children." She slowed as the sun dipped low, painting the sky the color of bruises. "You running from something," she said. It was not a question. Obinna swallowed. "Yes." Mama Ifunanya glanced at the rearview mirror. Their eyes met for a brief second. "Everybody is," she replied. They arrived at a settlement just as night settled in. Not a village, not a city, something in between. A place where people passed through but rarely stayed long enough to ask names. Mama Ifunanya's compound was small, tin roof, cracked walls, one mango tree leaning like an old man too tired to stand straight. Inside, she laid Cheek on a raffia mat and pressed a damp cloth to his forehead. She worked with practiced hands, the kind that had saved lives quietly before. "He will live," she said after a moment. Obinna's knees gave way. He sat hard on the floor, breath leaving him all at once. For the first time since their father died, someone had said live instead of survive. Mama Ifunanya turned to him. "But listen carefully, boy," she said. "Living is not the same as being safe." She poured water into a cup and handed it to him. "You can stay tonight. Maybe a few days. But men who chase children don't stop because of distance." Obinna's heart pounded. "You mean my uncle?" "I mean any man who believes something belongs to him," she cut in softly. That night, as Cheeky slept and the insects sang outside, Obinna lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time since they ran, he felt something dangerous grow in his chest. Not fear, hope. And far away, in a house that had gone too quiet, a man stood in his compound, staring at an empty room that should have held 2 boys. The silence was wrong, very wrong. He called their names once. No answer. He smiled slowly. They didn't die, he said to himself. They ran, and the thought pleased him, because running only made the hunt more interesting. The uncle discovered the escape at dawn, not because anyone told him, not because he cared to check on the boys, but because power noticed his absence. When he entered the compound that morning, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. The pots untouched. The water bucket still full. He stopped. Called their names once? No answer. Called again, louder. Still nothing. That was when he walked into the back room. The mat where the boys slept was empty. The torn blanket lay folded, carefully. Not rushed. Not panicked. Careful. His jaw tightened. They didn't run like animals. They planned. Rage rose slowly. The dangerous kind. The kind that smiles before it strikes. They think they can disappear, he muttered. He stepped outside and whistled. Men gathered. Neighbors who owed him favors. Relatives who feared him. People who never asked questions. They stole from me, he lied calmly. They are dangerous, he added. If you see them, bring them back. No one asked why 2 children needed hunting. Fear makes silence cheap. With the help of Mama Ifunanya, they survived. Obina narrated. The uncle. How he counted food twice. How he locked the storeroom every night. How he visited the local chief once a week. How he always returned with a smile that meant someone had been paid. And most importantly, they noticed how careful he was about his reputation. In their village, reputation was everything. A man could be cruel in private, but never exposed in public. One day the older brother went to the chief's compound, not to accuse, to ask a question. He bowed low, spoke softly, and said one sentence. If our father were alive, would this be allowed? The chief froze, because questions travel faster than accusations. What the uncle did not know was this. The boys had kept records, not written, memorized. Dates, witnesses, beatings, times food was withheld, times money meant for school disappeared. And one thing more damaging than all of it, a loan, taken in their dead father's name, signed illegally, used to buy land. Land the uncle did not legally own. The meeting was public, too public. Elders, women, men who remembered their father. The uncle laughed at first, called the boys liars. Then the questions started. Quiet, sharp, unanswerable. Why were school fees unpaid? Why were the boys starving? Why was their father's land missing? Why did the loan exist? Why were you trying to kill them? The uncle's voice cracked. Power collapses when witnesses arrive. There was no prison. No violence. Something worse. The uncle was stripped of guardianship. The land was reclaimed. The loan exposed. His name became a warning. No one trusted him again. No one lent him money. No one invited him to speak. In African villages, this is social death. He lived, but he no longer mattered. The boys left the village shortly after. Not running, walking, with school letters in their hands, with Mama Ifunanya and community support behind them, with dignity restored. Years later they would return, not to confront him, not to gloat, but to build a school, a future. And the uncle? He would watch from a distance, alive, but powerless. He tried to erase them quietly. They erased his power loudly, without ever raising their voices. The uncle did not recognize them at first, the day they returned. How could he? The boys he once starved were now men. The children he tried to erase had grown into something the world respected. He sat alone on the cracked veranda of the same house he had stolen. The roof leaked. The paint peeled. The land he sold off piece by piece was gone, and the people who once feared him now avoided him like a bad memory. Illness had humbled him. Poverty had finished the job. That afternoon, a black SUV stopped at the edge of the compound. Neighbors whispered. Some peeped through curtains. Others stood still, shocked. 2 men stepped out. Well-dressed, calm, composed. The uncle squinted. His eyes were weak now. His pride long gone. Please, he croaked, mistaking them for charity workers. I am sick. I have no one. Help me. The taller man said nothing. The other stepped forward slowly. Do you remember 2 boys? he asked quietly. 2 brothers. Their father died, and you promised to protect them? The uncle frowned, shook his head. Too many sins, too many faces. The man continued. You sent us away. You took our land. You told the village we were cursed. You said if we survived, it would be a miracle. The uncle's hands began to shake. No, he whispered. No. Recognition hit him like a collapse, not sudden, but total. He fell to his knees. It was hunger, he cried. I was afraid. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Please, forgive me. The world went quiet. The neighbors watched, waiting for revenge, waiting for justice that looked like cruelty. Instead, the younger brother knelt too, not to beg, but to speak eye to eye. You took our childhood, he said. You tried to take our future, but you failed. The older brother stepped forward and placed a small envelope on the ground. Inside, hospital bills paid, rent covered, food allowance for 6 months. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The uncle looked up, confused. Why? He asked through tears. After everything. Why help me? The answer was simple. Because we survived, the older brother said. And we refused to become you. They turned and walked away, did not look back. Behind them, the uncle wept, not because he was saved, but because he finally understood what he had lost. Power, legacy, and the chance to be remembered as anything other than a warning. Revenge feels powerful, but healing is louder. And sometimes, the greatest punishment is watching the people you tried to destroy choose mercy and move on without you. If this story moved you, please like the video. It helps the channel. Subscribe for more true stories. Thank you.